Journalism isn't dead, it's just evolving. And students bring this exact question up all the time. There's so much disinformation out there and so much fake news, and we don't shy away from talking about it. In fact, we make it part of the learning environment.
At a time when public trust in journalism has reached historic lows and misinformation spreads faster than ever, preparing the next generation of ethical journalists has never been more critical. I'm speaking with Dr. Colleen Leigh, Assistant Dean of Enrollment Management and Student Success at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. Today, we're exploring the evolution of journalism education and how the school is preparing students to uphold journalistic integrity while navigating today's challenging media landscape. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Leigh.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Just want to jump right in. You've got an extensive background, not just at the school, but in journalism. But given your multiple roles at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, how have you observed journalism education evolving to address the changing media landscape over the past, I could say 15 years, but you could even do it like last 3 years. What have you seen going on in terms of the approach of the school?
When I think back to when I first started at the school in 2007, we were very focused on, I guess, what you would call traditional journalism. So print, TV, radio. Digital wasn't completely new, it was around, but it wasn't necessarily the way it is now, front and center. And so how the school taught journalism looked very different now than it did back then. And so, like you said, just in the last 3 years, right, so much has changed. So as the landscape has shifted with the rise of social media, blogs, smartphones. I mean, our students had some flip phones back then when it started, data tools. And now, of course, with AI, we've had to just be really agile in how we're advancing our curriculum, how we're changing the curriculum, what we're teaching students, what we're removing from the curriculum. And so we've started integrating new forms of storytelling, new platforms, podcasts, of course, new tools. And so students are now learning to report for various platforms like TikTok and Instagram. We teach data visualization at the school. And so doing that in compelling ways across different audiences is really important. And also what's been really important is that we've never really abandoned, the core of journalism. And so that's what our curriculum tries to do, is try to meld both worlds. You want to have the core of journalism while also trying to advance the different tools. You want the students to be curious, to hold accountability, to connect with the communities that they're serving. And so we've changed a lot in terms of the curriculum and the different skills that students use, but we do continue to obviously help them continue to think like a journalist and not just use the latest tech gadget or the tech tool out there. So we're really trying to prepare them for what's going on now, what's going on next, mastering the next, right? It's a good podcast I'm on, because the industry is constantly shifting. And so they need to be able to shift with it without necessarily losing, the purpose of journalism and the grounding in the truth of journalism.
I totally get that. Over 20 years ago, I did a master's degree at the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University, and there was no Twitter. And our conversations about social media were pretty minimal because we're talking about 2002, 2003, where it really wasn't on folks' radar as something a journalism school would be talking about. Fast forward to just a couple of years ago during the pandemic, I did an online master's at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State. And that was almost entirely digital, everything from digital advertising to digital ethics. And it was a totally different kind of degree. So seeing how that change occurred just from my two experiences, I can imagine a lot has changed. And you mentioned TikTok. I'm fascinated by the shift in public trust in journalism, where folks seem more willing to believe something they saw on TikTok or social media than something they read in a well-established newspaper, or they see even on cable news, which has its own challenges. And there has been this pressure from political figures. There has been a lot of misinformation out there. There's been kind of an on-again, off-again of fact-checking journalism. How is the Newmark Graduate School preparing students to uphold journalistic integrity while navigating these charged environments and the new forms of media that journalism happens on?
Yeah. I mean, the pressure on journalists right now is so real between the disinformation that's out there, like you mentioned, political polarization, the sheer, like, the speed of the news cycle itself, right, is much different even from when the school opened in 2006. So it's a really tough climate, a really tough environment to kind of step into, for students to say, yeah, this is what I want to do with my career. So many things are changing. So at the school, we really try to lean into all those challenges. When our admissions team is out there, we say, journalism isn't dead, it's just evolving. And students bring this exact question up all the time. There's so much disinformation out there and so much fake news, and we don't shy away from talking about it. In fact, we make it part of the learning environment. So we, of course, teach students how to verify quickly, verify accurately, because as I mentioned, speed is of critical importance. You do have to try to get out there with the information, but making sure it's accurate, not just getting it out there. And then unfortunately, you find out, oh my goodness, that was not accurate. And then they have to do a correction. But also how to recognize the disinformation that's out there, how to trace their sources, how to think critically about the systems that spread that disinformation. And there's also a huge emotional and ethical toll that the work can take on the reporter. Reporting nowadays really isn't just about being fast. It's not just about being factual. It's really about being, I would say, like, thoughtful, grounded, resilient. You really have to have a tough skin to be able to bounce back, And so one thing that I feel that makes our school really unique is how community focused it is. We do have several programs at the school, but one of them is specifically focused on engagement. It's called engagement journalism. But really across all of our programs, our students do get real world experience. They report in neighborhoods across New York City. They are required to do that. So they're constantly learning how to build that trust with the community. You're coming as an outsider. I mean, some of our students are coming from across the country, across the globe. And so they're not New Yorkers, right? Half of our students are, but, or at least were living there at the time when they started. But, to have an outsider coming into a community, they have to learn how to listen, how to be accountable, how to develop that trust, because, you just go into community, you want to helicopter in or parachute in, as they say, right? You really want to learn how to tell someone's story and how to earn that right to do so. And so you have to develop that trust. And so they do have to be in a community for at least a semester. Some students stay there for the first academic year. And I really feel like that's how integrity is formed, not necessarily just in theory, but actual in practice. And so across the campus, we have an open dialogue about things like this, about bias in the media, systemic bias in the media, the role of race and power in storytelling, what it actually means to be a journalist today. And we are helping students to try to find their voice and their backbone, right? Because it is tough out there. So they're just not ready to report on the story. They can really stand by their story, and do a good job while they're doing so.
You're reminding me of one of my first reporting experiences at the beginning of my program at Syracuse. They sent us all out into the city to interview people about loitering, not the most gripping topic. And, you start going around and asking total strangers on street corners in Syracuse, New York, to talk to you. And they're like, go away. And then finally, this one guy is like, wait, loitering? Wait, I want to talk to you about this. Stay right here. And I happened to have a photographer from the Post-Standard newspaper in Syracuse with me. And this guy brought out a box of garbage that people who had been loitering outside of his business had just left. And he's like, I know you said loitering, but there's also littering. And he's showing me this. And this is like perfect, made for print imagery of this poor guy standing on a street corner holding a box of garbage that he picked up. And somehow, just by being, that embedded journalist, kind of, you got to go onto the streets, talk to people, get their stories, you can discover this magic. And you have a career that spans being a reporter. You were a TV reporter before you were in enrollment management and student success. Do you feel like that prepared you? I feel like it prepared me, but do you feel like it prepared you for your approach to, as a higher education administrator and working with journalists and the next generation of journalists? Did that kind of have an impact on what you do now?
Definitely. I mean, I feel journalism just has so many transferable skills, And so although it might seem on paper, like, how did you go from journalism into higher ed? And it might feel like it was kind of a huge career pivot. But honestly, I feel like the through line, like you said, was really about storytelling and the people, right? So when I was a TV reporter, it taught me how to do all those skills that I just mentioned, right? Listen deeply and thoughtfully, how to ask the right questions, how to really understand what drives people. And so I bring those kind of same gut instincts into work with my students every day. So whether I'm trying to recruit the next class, try to support someone through graduation, I'm always thinking about, okay, where was this student? Where did they come from? Where were they before? What brought them to the school? What are they passionate about? What can they overcome? And so I feel like journalism has really trained me to find that nuance in people's experiences. And so it's been really invaluable in my role. And then, of course, there's what I would say like the empathy piece, right? So I know what it is to be a graduate student. I got my master's in journalism before becoming a reporter. And I also was a reporter, as you mentioned. So I know what it is to face that strict deadline, to be told no a million times. We're getting to yes. Put yourself into the story and do all this stuff for a story because you feel like this is a story that should be told. And so when a student does come into my office, right, they come in, they're stressed out, and there's always those, we know when they're going to come in, right? It's like it's cyclical, right? So we know, we're going to get to that point mid-semester that they're going to come in and they're going to be stressed, whether it's about coming up and, going into their summer internship, finding that internship, pitching a story, to an outside publication, whether it's within class, whether it's when they go out into the field. A lot of our students, funny enough, sometimes are really shy when they get into the program. And we're like, oh my gosh, but this program brings it out of them. And so I get it. I've been there as a journalist. I've been there as a grad student. And so I think that shared experience really builds a lot of trust. And then it also helps when I'm working with faculty or alums. I'm not coming in purely from, I'm just this higher education administrator. I've been in now higher education longer than I've been in journalism, but I do understand the work. I respect the work. I think that helps me in a way bridge the gap between the different aspects of the school. And so, whether I'm in a faculty meeting and I'm talking about the different admissions policies that we're shaping, or we're trying to figure out, how to redesign or re-envision a new student support program. I'm always trying to think like a journalist, what's, the best for the student, what's the larger issue, if students are coming into our campus and they're saying, oh, I need some food and things like this. It's like, okay, well, we have a food pantry, but like, let's go a little bit back. Like, what's going on? This didn't happen last semester. So let's try to find what's the larger story. And then how do we help the students, moving forward? So I think the journalism background has really, really helped me out in this role.
And of course, I could probably name many students that I've talked to over my career who say, I want to be a journalist, I want to be a reporter. I don't know that I've ever met a student like an undergraduate saying, I want to be a director of admissions. I want to work in student services, because they don't really have any experience with it. But kind of drilling into that piece, I mean, you've got an extensive background in working specifically at CUNY, but also in admissions and career services, student services. And you see that full student journey from applicant inquiry / applicant to graduating student who's employed. And you're in the city of New York, which is it's not an easy place. I mean, I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up there, and I know that there's a lot of people who they get there and it's not the place for them for lots of reasons. So what patterns have you observed about the students who thrive in the challenging environment you're in, and particularly the challenging journalism job market we're in right now? What are the characteristics that make students successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like you said, kind of being able to see the full arc of a student's experience, I think that's one of the coolest aspects of my job. I did start my higher education career just solely in admissions. And when I was able to move into this role at the Newmark School of Journalism, I was like, this is amazing, because you're not just that road warrior where you're out there in the field just recruiting and then you're on to the next class. You really get to see them as, okay, let's see how they did. They were amazing in their, in getting through the application process and getting here. How are they doing as a student? Where are they now interning? And then I get to see them as an alum. I also oversee alumni affairs, and, where do they end up going out and getting their job? So that's really, really interesting. So I'm able to see them when they're applying, when they're all nervous and hopeful. And then I get to watch them kind of grow into these confident, capable, journalists. So I have noticed some clear patterns, I would say. The students who I feel that thrive are the ones who are the most open to experiences. They're persistent, but they're also open. They don't have this idea. I mean, they might have an idea coming in where they'll be like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. But then when they come into the program, they're open to learning, to experimenting, to staying curious. Our dean constantly mentions, like, this is the place where you need to fail, because you might not have that opportunity when you're out in the real world. You fail, you might lose your job. Hopefully that doesn't happen where you're in an outlet where they'll be like, oh, this is fine. Let's learn from this mistake. But there's sometimes that's not the case. So the ones who can experiment while they're in the program and stay curious, go after opportunities, even if it feels a little scary, pitch stories, reach out to faculty, apply to all the fellowships that we offer, really whatever it takes. And so they also have, I would say, this strong sense of purpose, I guess would be a good word. They know what they're doing, they know why they're doing it, and it helps them stay grounded when the job market gets tough, when they face rejection from even just summer internships that we require. It kind of gives them that motivation, that fuel to keep going. And then I would say another big factor would be the support systems around them. So we've built a really strong network across our campus of different faculty mentors, alumni that they can reach out to. So alumni connections. We have an amazing career services office that oversees our summer internship, but they offer all these different career fairs and workshops and ways for them to network and mingle with outlets that come to the campus or do informational sessions. And so they can actively engage in all of that. And none of that, it's really up to the student. But the ones who thrive try to take advantage, right? It's a very quick program. They're only here for a year and a half. So they want to try to take advantage as much as they can. They think about building this career from when they come in and really start to kind of pick and choose. Okay, what do I want to try? What are things that I don't necessarily know? And that's why I'm in school. Let me try to experiment. And then I would say the final thing would probably be just the power of relationships, right? So journalism is really a relationship-driven field. So you have the sources, you have your editors, you have your peers, so the students who build relationships, whether it's with their faculty, the dean, me, and they try to maintain them over time. I feel like those are the ones who thrive, who keep growing, learning, and really are the ones that succeed in journalism.
Finding community is so important for graduate student success, and being able to talk with like-minded folks and get that kind of mentorship is so valuable. And it brings me to kind of the last question I wanted to ask you, and I have to ask about this because diversity, equity, inclusion is such a hot topic right now in higher education, and important, particularly when you consider reporting and the value of diverse points of view and providing that as a fact. How is the graduate school working to create pathways for underrepresented communities, marginalized communities in journalism? Is that a focus still?
Yes, it is definitely. And this is something that's been really close to my heart and to the mission of the school from the beginning. I mean, I started my higher education career as an admissions and diversity representative at Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. And so once I started at the school and we're in New York City, I mean, at Newmark, we've always said that journalism really should reflect, the communities it serves. And I talked about earlier about how students have to go into those communities and really earn that trust to go into the community. So that doesn't just mean, we're opening the door to diverse students and making sure they feel welcomed and supported and empowered, but we've done a lot of work at our school on access. So right now, the school is in a free tuition campaign that hopefully will happen in a few years. We would be the first journalism master's program in the country to be fully funding all of our students that enroll. But currently, we're offering full tuition scholarships. We've been able to offer them for this year and last year, so for these last 2 years, to all New York resident students. So all in-state students that enroll in our program or admitted in our program will have been able to get full tuition scholarships. So that's great. So we're kind of on that path to embarking to realizing that full tuition campaign. But especially with students from underrepresented backgrounds, we're building partnerships across CUNY. We've started a number of 4+1 programs that help expand the pipeline for CUNY students that are doing a CUNY undergrad to come into our program. And once students are here, like I mentioned, we really do surround them with the support and the mentorship, whether it's mental health resources or, leadership development or, working with different faculty. We really try to be there for them. And so we also make sure that our faculty and any people we bring into the community reflect the diversity of our students. And like you mentioned, the city that we're living in, right, which is New York City. So this really is important to the school. It's also talking about how we want to shape the journalism industry, so by diversifying our student body, we're hoping to, create a diverse journalism industry with representation and helping students to build the confidence to do that when they get out into the field. So at the end of the day, I would say we're not necessarily just training journalists. We're really training the people that are going to be those change makers, and giving them the space and the support to do so.
So important to establish credibility with audiences, to do that, to create that perspective. Dr. Colleen Leigh, Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So here's my take. Dr. Leigh reminds us that journalism education isn't just about teaching technical skills, but about cultivating a deep commitment to truth and accountability. As we navigate this fractured media landscape, schools like the Craig Newmark Graduate School are at the front lines in rebuilding public trust. The future of informed democracy may well depend on how successfully we prepare these emerging journalists to uphold their profession's highest standards.